Persona 5 Royal has an amazing narrative, detailing the process by which Joker and the Phantom Thieves overcome injustice to improve society, without letting that injustice consume them. But what kind of person would Joker be if instead of rising above unfairness, he furiously lashed out at the society that wronged him and perpetuated that injustice? He'd be like this freak right here. I'd make a pancake joke here, but I think some people are a little tired of the meme.
Pancakes. I don't want to hear that word again for a long, long time.
For most of the player's early interactions with Akechi, he comes off as a highly kind and conscientious person, but it's all an act. Akechi is focused on appearing to be someone who's deserving of praise and love, and in doing so he falls short of being the appreciated person that he wishes to be. The Akechi that the player sees up until the end of Sai's Palace is a complete fabrication that Akechi himself created to receive the most praise and admiration from the public possible. He acts polite so that he can perfectly fill the role of an honorable detective so that society can affirm his existence, because what Akechi truly desires is recognition and acceptance. The reason why he desires such recognition is because of his previous neglect by his father and society, but because he's been lacking in such recognition and affirmation his whole life, he feels angry at society for being so unjust to him, and this manifests in the form of wrath. One of the most prominent themes of Persona 5 is the representation of the 7 deadly sins in the antagonists of the game. Shido unites all the palace rulers of the game into one cohesive whole through his political corruption, and is the root of the other palace rulers' distortions, due to him enabling their corrupt behaviors through the metaverse. And it's fitting that Shido effectively created and perpetuated the antagonistic roles of the other palace rulers, because his sin of pride is seen as the root of the other 7 deadly sins that can be found within the game. However, the sin of wrath is seemingly absent from the palace rulers of the game. Sure, Futaba does have the will seeds of wrath, but I think it's more apt to say that her palace's sin is sloth because she melancholically waits to die in her own tomb. Her wrathful cognition of her mother didn't come out of nowhere, and actually was imposed on her by a certain pancake-eating metaverse user. Akechi killed Futaba's mother and wrote her supposed suicide letter, creating Futaba's wrathful cognition of her mother. Beyond just imposing a cognition of wrath upon others, everything that Akechi does in the context of the story is an aspect of his own wrath against his father Shido. Akechi effectively lashed out all of his anger and hatred in the metaverse to get back at the world and Shido for mistreating him. This wrath is all in service of exercising Akechi's own justice in the punishment of his father, and over the course of the game, Akechi's sense of justice is thoroughly explored. Akechi's arcana within Persona 5 is justice, and most of his character and personal philosophy revolve around the dispensation of such justice. Initially, he seems to advocate for a traditional Western conception of justice that pertains to following set precedents and rules to provide consistent and fair law enforcement, which can be seen in his primary criticism of the Phantom Thieves, that being that their justice undermines traditional methods of law enforcement and unjustly takes away free will from the criminals that they're trying to stop. Akechi also questions Joker on his conceptions of justice in their Confidant, specifically criticizing the option where Joker implies he has his own justice. In Sai's Palace, Akechi finally lets a little bit of his genuine feelings come out when he describes his motivation behind his inaction of justice.
Why do you seek justice?
Because of sickening human beings. Yes. My contempt for such people drives my sense of justice. It isn't some grand reason like society's sake or some lofty ideal. It's simply an absurd grudge, and extremely personal.
Indicating that his lofty ideals aren't what they seem to be. Later, this is reinforced when he is revealed to be the one behind the mental shutdowns, and it proves that his previous claims about justice were just a facade. He describes how everything he has done in the Shadowverse wasn't in service of Shido, but was in the service of punishing him in the most harsh way possible. To Akechi, his justice of punishing Shido for being a horrible person was his primary goal, and he would perform any action to achieve that goal regardless of how depraved it was. It's clear that Akechi has a very warped perception of justice that hinges on his personal judgment that was likely developed from seeing no justice in his own upbringing, with his father abandoning him and his mother, leaving them in abject poverty, ultimately leading to her suicide, and Akechi consequentially being placed in foster homes that would ultimately fail him. So Akechi's true perception of justice is based on whatever he personally views as fair, a drastic change from his facade of believing in higher justice when he was pretending to be the detective prince. Akechi's all-out attack in Sai's palace reinforces his facade in the banner declaring that his sole interest is uncovering the truth. And once we get to Maruki's palace, his all-out attack screen truly shows what he believes by declaring that he decides the truth. Akechi's true belief in justice is highly cynical, asserting that there is no truth and that he will use his power to create the truth that he wants others to believe. This warped conception of justice likely comes from seeing success of detestable people like his father through corruptly exercising their power over the weak, and he came to believe the only way to achieve his justice was to manipulate society just as his father did. Akechi's two conceptions of justice seem to reflect an argument within Plato's Republic between Socrates and Thrasymachus. Socrates asserts that justice is a virtue that's worth doing for its own sake because it creates more fair and stable societies, and because it helps orient individuals towards truth and goodness. Socrates' conception of justice is admirable and provides a framework that works to uncover objective truth and benefit all people, similarly to the ideas that Akechi espouses in his interviews early in the game. Thrasymachus, however, claims that justice is only something that the sheep of society follow, and that the ideal state of humanity is to impose their will on others unjustly. Akechi's true beliefs fall exactly in line with this way of thinking, and his metaverse killings are actually a perfect comparison to the Ring of Gaiji's argument. That argument being a hypothetical situation where such a ring could make someone invisible and can remove all social consequences for being unjust, and Akechi basically has a similar tool in his ability to go into the metaverse to commit his crimes. Akechi performs such evil acts in the metaverse because there are no social consequences for what he does, and because he believes his injustice is justified in the face of previous injustices that have been acted upon him. So when Akechi is faced with a decision to kill the Phantom Thieves to save his own life in Shido's palace, it's reasonable to wonder why he would do it. He's shown himself to be callous when it comes to the well-being of others, when it comes in conflict with fulfilling his own ambitions. So why would he not only refuse a deal that's beneficial to him, but also sacrifice his life for the sake of others? Well, that answer becomes clear when looking into his relationship with Joker through their confidant conversations. Akechi is sure of himself and his actions before he meets Joker, but over the course of their confidant conversations, he comes to doubt and reevaluate his decisions when confronted with Joker's different decisions. When they meet at the jazz club in their fourth confidant conversation, Akechi learns more about Joker's situation and seems to be genuinely intrigued by the way Joker was able to overcome his unfortunate circumstances. Then when they're in the arcade in their fifth confidant rank, Akechi remembers that when he was a child, he would ideally envision himself as a hero, which seems to shake him a little bit. He then asks Joker what type of justice he sticks to, seemingly evaluating Joker's different conception of justice in relation to his own. Akechi's self-evaluation comes to a head in his 8th confidant rank, where he fights Joker in Mementos and loses. After that, he directly tells Joker that he hates him.
I hate you. Your deft handling of your unfortunate circumstances, your uniqueness, your ability to surpass me, all these irritate me. You're the one person I refuse to lose to.
He resents that Joker was able to deal with injustice in a healthy way, and that he's continually able to succeed and surpass him because it forces Akechi to reevaluate himself and whether or not he's living life as best he can. So, when Akechi sacrifices himself in Shido's palace, he shows that he does believe in justice, but in the past he's been too weak to actualize it himself. That's why he tells Joker that he hates him in their 8th confidant rank. He doesn't hate Joker because he finds Joker's personality or actions disgusting, but because Joker is everything that he wanted to be and tried to emulate in his detective prince facade. Where Joker rebelled against and overcame injustice, Akechi submitted to it, showing a stark contrast in their disposition. In that moment in Shido's palace, Akechi realizes that he had been manipulated by Shido to do such evil deeds the whole time, and that he failed himself in being too weak to rebel against Shido's injustice, and became complicit in that which he hated. When he saves the Phantom Thieves, he finally makes a decision to be the person who he wants to be, instead of letting the injustice of his life consume him. And so Akechi's character arc ends with him finally becoming the person he wished to be by dying to protect others. That is, until he didn't, because of Maruki. After the defeat of Yaldabaoth, Akechi reveals himself to have survived his apparent death at Shido's palace and turns himself in for all the crimes he committed. It's later revealed that he didn't actually survive Shido's palace and that Dr. Maruki brought him back to life, which makes it somewhat unclear as to whether or not Akechi would have turned himself in. I think that all of Akechi's actions taken during the third semester are genuinely his actions and aren't fabrications made by Maruki, particularly because Maruki himself mentioned that he brought Akechi back to keep the relationship between Akechi and Joker from ending abruptly. Also, it's doubtful that if Maruki fabricated Akechi that he would design Akechi's actions as undermining his dream. He would likely just make Akechi like he did the actualization ending, where he's needlessly cheery, like his fake self. So, if we're operating under the assumption that Akechi acts of his own volition in the third semester, then it leaves some questions as to why he would do that when he seemed to be entirely motivated by selfish goals up until his final selfless act of his death. In analyzing his death scene more thoroughly, it becomes evident that Akechi comes to realize that his previous goals and lifestyle were inherently flawed. He had spent his time with a persona trying to fabricate an image of himself that he would project onto the world to manipulate people into respecting him and giving him recognition. When he sacrifices himself to let the Phantom Thieves escape, he finally does a genuine selfless act that isn't done to make him appear better, but to genuinely be a better person and in some way atone for his crimes. When given a second chance of life by Maruki, Akechi refuses to give up his freedom and accountability, and he affirms his death within Shido's palace. He believes that he should be able to find his own path and will reap the consequences of his choices.
I will carve my own path for myself. I refuse to accept a reality concocted by someone else, stuck under their control for the rest of my days. Do you think I'd be happy with this? Being shown mercy now, of all times? I don't want to be pitied. This isn't something I'm debating with you. Your indecisiveness on the matter is essentially a betrayal of my wishes.
In his fight against Maruki, Akechi ultimately affirms his sacrifice in Shido's palace, which was a sort of penance for his crimes against others, and a step towards becoming the person that he wishes he could have been. When Maruki tries to sway Akechi to his side, Akechi becomes disgusted and infuriated by the proposition, because it would undermine and devalue the sacrifice that he made to overcome his poor decisions in life. Akechi doesn't want to be pitied and wants to live life according to his own choices and their respective consequences, and he finally overcomes his previous desire to take shortcuts to admiration. Over the course of the game, Akechi grows from someone who is self-assured in his wrathful and selfish acts into someone who reevaluates his goals and actions to ultimately reorient himself towards justice, to become the person that he aspires to be. Within the context of the story, Akechi shows the wrong way to respond to injustice, and shows what can happen when someone stares into an abyss of injustice and blinks. But Akechi finds his way, and reaffirms all of his choices by fighting against the mercy of Maruki, to face the consequences of his choices, showing just how just he's become.
I'm rather proud.